Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Anne DeButte, bringing you another look and perspective as we continue on with our Let's Talk About Grief show. Today we are going to be turning the tables and actually speaking with a grief recovery coach, Dee Anthony. Dee Anthony is a grief recovery coach, as I mentioned, as well as an empowerment coach. He's also an author of 14 Reasons You're Not Letting Yourself Heal. Which of these are keeping you miserable and stuck? That sounds as if we can really delve into and take up most of the show exploring those. For the moment, I'd like to let you know that having a coach when you're grieving is probably the most powerful and supportive things that you can do for yourself. And I'm sure after you've listened to this recording, you'll begin to see grief a little differently and how working with a coach can actually promote healing and move you along. Right now, I'd love to welcome Dee Anthony. Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Anyway, I'm so happy that you could find time and out of your busy schedule to speak to our listeners. And I'd like you to tell me and our listeners a little bit about what caused you to become a grief recovery coach.
It sort of happened in stages for me. It started with the loss of my mom some 21 or so years ago. I say or so because I'm not a big detail person, so I don't tend to focus on the year so much as I focus on that time in my life. Suffice it to say, as most of you can fully appreciate, my life changed in a big way. And there were days that I just went to places that I never knew existed into depths, and I dealt with my fair share of guilt and so forth. And so bottom line is, when it's all said and done, I have probably about 5 years or so that I really can't account for. A lot of that time I was on autopilot because I was still working my job and I was still with my family, trying to be as normal as I could be. And much of that time thinking that I was getting better, that I was recovering, as it were. But most often that was just me trying to move myself along so that I could get back to that sense of feeling normal again and have some empowerment in my life. Anyway, along the lines, one of the things that I started to do was write. I was writing things because they were cathartic for me, and I realized that the inspirational stories, a lot of them were centered around loss and how to deal with loss. And I realized that not only were they cathartic for me, but they were really helping others who I shared them with, who were also dealing with their own loss. And the reality was that was some 20-something years ago. There was no Facebook. There were no Facebook groups or any of the other online social media type places. And there wasn't much information at all about really moving forward out of grief. It was that topic that nobody really talked about, so you kind of buried it within. So that was my way. I started doing some writing and I started figuring out some things on my own. And as I started writing, that grew bigger. So I started up a website way back when. I don't even know if it's still up now. It's called Something to Share. But I would write things and invite people to write about their own grief and offer a little support and things. And I was doing that at night. So I still had my day job. I would stay up to crazy hours at night helping people and whatever, and then try to roll out of bed in the morning and do that. Well, that kept going. And eventually I started getting more focused on my job and moving forward. And then one day I walked into my job thinking everything was fine and was told, well, it's not you, it's us. We're downsizing. So sign a severance package and so the question then for me was, what do I do? Okay, do I get back on that corporate ladder and go find that next job and keep chasing that? Or do I do something more meaningful with my days? I learned about coaching about less than a week after that happened. I went and signed up for to get my professional coaching certification, and that was all she wrote. I never looked back. I decided that life was trying to tell me to do something completely different with my life. So I started out as a personal success and empowerment coach, and then what happened was one of my clients 2 years in was really struggling. She wasn't getting the same kind of results, and I realized that the reason that she wasn't was because she had lost her son several years before. And she had been frustrated trying to find help and trying to find anything that could help. She had gone to specialists, she had gone to counselors and so forth, and nothing. And so she just decided this must be her fate, and she would, and the family didn't understand, so she would just have to bear this weight alone. And when I realized that that was what was going on with her, it became my mission to find a way to help her. And so what I did was I utilized some of the lessons learned, things I had learned to get myself through it. And I combined that with some of the principles, the insights, and the tools and techniques that I was using as a personal success coach. Part of that involved me helping people with traumas that they had in their life, sometimes lifelong traumas that had happened in childhood. And I theorized, why couldn't I use some of those tools and techniques? Because what was lost, if not trauma, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so I combined those, and once that client said to me 2 months later that I could hear her crying, audibly hear her crying, and she said, I just want to thank you. My husband told me that it's so great to see the light in my eyes once again. Okay, I was lost at that point.
I can imagine.
And this became my mission. So I then spent the better part of 5.5 years, putting something that I think is pretty unique together to actually play games. I don't dance around it. I have an approach that's pretty straightforward because, as I think I told you before, my theory is that death and grief and all of this is, I compare it to the bully in the schoolyard, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't get beyond the bully by being nice. You got to stand up to the bully. And so I'm here to help people learn how to stand up to the bully and realize that they actually can get their life back. And there's no feeling like that feeling. And I'm sure you know this as well. There's no feeling like that feeling of being able to literally give someone their life back. Because when we're in the depths of this, we're living, but are we really? You know?
We like to think we are. Do you think it was your skills as a coach? Doesn't matter what type of coach, executive, grief, relationship coach, you are taught to listen in a different way than society listens. Do you think that's what allowed you to connect with this woman and connect to that deep grief?
I think that's part of it. I definitely think that's part of it, and the tools and techniques and thinking about things in a different way. I also feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And what I mean by that is that I can look back now on my life and I can see how all of the different facets, when I was in corporate America, the training that I took on, I was in technology, which is about 180 degrees from this, right?
Yep.
I was a middle manager responsible for multi-million-dollar projects. But you know what I was doing? I was supporting people over the phone. Yeah. I was learning to interpret and connect with people over the phone. I am as comfortable talking over the phone now because of that as I am talking face to face. And that's a big part because my support primarily happens over the phone. So that was part of it. I also think there's a part of me, you mentioned the listening part. There's a part of me that has always had this empathetic quality that people could connect with. I can think back on times in my life when people tell me things about them that in many cases they hadn't told anybody because they connected with something within me. So I think there's a special quality within all of us, but I think I'm in tune with it. I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to be in tune with it and use it a lot more. And my clients will comment from time to time that it's a bit of a struggle because most of my clients are female and they have preconceived notions of a male, right? And males don't connect with feelings and they don't want to hear this stuff. And so for some, it's a bit of a stretch before they realize, whoa, not only can I connect with this guy in this way and be totally heard and be totally connected, but I also can get a different perspective because it's coming from a guy.
Yes.
All of that together, I think, goes into me. And as I said before, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Isn't that a beautiful feeling? It's almost as if you have this event, this challenge, and it sets you off on a different path. I like to look at it as a quest, a Greek mythology. You're that hero or heroine going off on that quest and fighting your demons, which I believe is the grieving part, and coming out the other side a totally changed person, because how can you not be going through all that and then finding your path as you have?
Well, if I can just add to what you just said, to that point, here's what I want your audience to think about. As you just suggested, one way or the other, you're going to be a changed person through all of this. The question that you have to ask yourself is, which way are you going to take that change? Are you going to take that change and cycle in a positive direction? Somehow, some way, find a way? Because the truth is, that's what your loved one would want for you anyway. And that's how that it doesn't make up for the loss. But at least it can bring something good into that space. Because while I would give anything to have my mom back, the truth is that's not the way it works, number one. And number two, if what happened had not happened, then I would not have had that change that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be here talking to you all today. And I wouldn't have made the change for that first woman and all the other changes that have happened since then. There are so many people who still would be in a place where they wouldn't be connected with their own children, or who would have continued that downward slide, or not being able to get out the house and just deal. And so you're going to be changed one way or the other. Why not try to find a way to take that change in a positive direction? Absolutely.
The way I look at the grief, it can break the walls that you've built up around your heart down, allowing you to be more compassionate and more empathetic.
The truth is that most of us are looking for someone to connect with, someone to care. And we get that. I think that hardened piece comes from feeling like you failed at trying to connect so long that it's just not out there. And there are some people, when they finally find that strand that they can connect with, they go to a place and they just share. They are who they are. I think we want to connect. I think we want to be more personal. We're just afraid. And when you find somebody that can make you feel comfortable and allow you to go there, and finally get that help that you've been trying to convince yourself that you don't need. Crazy values and perceptions that somehow if we need help, if we get help, that makes us weak. Well, my question for your listeners is this: what makes us weaker? Seeing that we're not finding a way out alone, going to get some help from somebody who can help us get better, or seeing that we're not getting there alone and just staying there.
It's an individual thing. Some people feel that if I hold on to this grief, this is my crutch, and if I let it go, who will I be without that grief? The grief is somehow make their reason for living.
So you said a couple interesting words. I don't know how deeply you want to go into this. All right. So I won't go too deep, but the two for now. But the two interesting words that you mentioned there were the words feel and believe. Okay. The thing about feelings that you should know, this is something that I teach my clients, and I don't know why we aren't taught this in school. Okay.
It would be so important if we were, wouldn't it?
It would change the world. Yeah. The thing about feelings is this: feelings have no alignment with reality. Feelings have alignment with one thing and one thing only. The reality is every feeling that you've ever had for the course of your whole life has come from one place and one place only, and that is your thoughts.
Yeah.
You don't have feelings without first thinking a certain way. And so the fact that you feel something strongly doesn't make it so. I know that's a bit of a shock. Feel something strongly does not make that reality, even though we think it does. Yeah. It only means that's something that you've been thinking about a lot.
Yep. And it's the stories around that you're telling yourself that creates the downward spiral.
So the fact that you feel that strongly, that you believe that strongly, that holding on is your only option because that's the only thing you have left, doesn't change the reality that that's actually false.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, you only feel that and believe that because that's what you're thinking. But the truth is this: you always grief was never the link. Grief is not the link to your loved one. Grief is the link to the loss. They are two completely different animals. Grief is the connection to the pain.
Yeah.
And it is not only is it not your only link to your loved one, it is not a link at all. You know what your link is? You know what the link is that has been there and has always been there and is getting confused in all the other things that you're thinking, that you're telling yourself? That link is love. And that link has been there and it will always be there. It's just a matter of you beginning to reconnect with that link again. Grief is not your friend. Grief is not helping you. Grief is distorting and tainting the love.
I'll pause there to allow people to take that in because that was a lot of information. Great information. And it is so true that we do get the two confused. The grief is the mixture of feelings and emotions that are naturally and normally there when you lose somebody that you love. It's not about the quality of that love. As you said, that love is always there.
You know what grief really is when you boil it down? Grief is a reaction.
Yeah.
Grief is a reaction to a painful, traumatic incident. Mm-hmm. It's a reaction. Mm-hmm. It is not permanent. It is not overwhelming. It is not any of those things until we make it so. When we continue to think it, and then we start to feel it, and then it becomes what we see is the truth. Here's the opportunity. Here's what recovery is about. Recovery is about taking that reaction that is grief, that pain, that isolation, that despondency, that disillusionment, that misery, and all those things, and trying to find out how you can turn that reaction, was a reaction, is a response without thought. It's a response without the implementation of a positive, beneficial element of it, right? Mm-hmm. And what we want to do is change that reaction into a response. And the response starts to come in because we know that our loved ones, they don't want us to continue in this darkness, continue in this pain. And so we can't, as people who are helping people in this area, we have no ability to take the clock back and erase what happened. Again, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. But the reality, the opportunity that you have today, if you're listening to this and you're struggling in this painful place, the opportunity that you have today is to begin to come to a different perspective on all of this and realize that there's grief, that reaction, which is a normal reaction. And then there's all the things that we are thinking and the weight that we're adding on top of that. And most of the pain comes from that weight that we're adding on top. So even if you assume that you're going to keep the grief, which you don't have to, by the way, but even if you assume that you're going to keep the grief, wouldn't it be good to get that other weight that you're adding on top of it, that you're thinking all these things and it's not necessary? I think so.
Yeah.
Story, my favorite parable of all, because it is so powerful and it fits right into this space that we're talking about. So here it is. There are two monks traveling, going on a long journey. They're walking together in silence, and they come upon this young woman sitting at the side of the river, and she's crying. And they come to find out that the reason that she's crying is because she desperately needs to get to the other side of the river. Without saying a word, the older monk walks over to her. He hoists her on his shoulders and carries her across the river, puts her down on the bank on the other side, and then he walks back, upon which time the two monks continue on their journey in silence. 7 hours later, the young monk can't take it anymore, and he says, "What were you thinking? We're not supposed to talk to a woman, say nothing about touching a woman, and you not only touched her, but you picked her up and you carried her across the river. What was wrong with you? What are you thinking about?" And the older monk said, "You are correct. I did pick the young woman up and carry her across the river. But you see the difference between you and I put her down 7 hours ago. You've been carrying her ever since." If you think about it, that is the perfect analogy of what we're talking about here today. The way that I explain it, to break it down for my clients, because invariably we get to this story and talk about it, is for everything that happens in our lives, and that includes the loss, there are two components to it. There is the event itself, the older monk's portion, if you would, and then there is how we carry it, which is the younger monk's portion. And the reality is most of what causes us the pain and the illness and the sickness and the bad feelings, the jealousy, isolation, you name it, most of those are the young monk's portion, is how we carry things. Mm-hmm. That adds so much pain, and then we add so much pain on top of it. So if we learn how not to carry that stuff the way that we're carrying it, we can make a huge difference on the impact. And that's what we're really talking about here. The loss happened, that is the event. But so much of what you're carrying right now, and you're calling grief, and you're saying can never stop, can never change, can never get any better, so much of that is about the way that we're carrying it. And if you learn how to carry it in a different way, I guarantee you the impact that all this is having on you and your life will change. And through it all, you get through it, and what you'll find is you'll actually be more connected with your loved one than you ever would, because you'll be in tune with that love once again, and all that pain and darkness won't be in the middle of it, separate from that connection.
It also connects you more to yourself when you aren't out there in the worry and the guilt and the blame and the storytelling. When you can put that down, you suddenly realize that, okay, there's an opportunity for me to really connect to that love and who I really am by examining your thoughts, the stories, and those beliefs. That's where I'd like to cycle back to, because a lot of the pain that I'm seeing society carrying is we keep perpetuating the belief that grief is permanent, that you'll never get over it. And it was those statements given to me by a professional when I experienced my first loss that absolutely didn't make sense to me. Having a nursing background, I knew the body is amazing. You can heal. So that statement, you never get over it. Well, yes, you've got tremendous heartache, but heartache can be healed. To me, it's the thoughts are a little bit like the body is attempting to heal, and then we keep picking away at the scab. So getting back to these beliefs that are out there, how do we change that thought?
We do what we're doing right now. We talk, we educate.
Okay.
You know what the reason, there's a simple reason why this is happening. People can't give you what they don't have. And in the absence of something, when it's absent for so long and all the messaging you hear is that it doesn't exist, you start to become convinced maybe it doesn't exist. I did a quote. Simply because you find yourself in the desert doesn't mean that there's not any water to be had. And I like to use stories and parables and things of that nature because what it does is it kind of comes at us from a different perspective, and it allows people to open up a little bit where otherwise they've been blocked off. Where that quote came from is I read something one day that astonished me, and that is this. Pretty much wherever you are in the desert, there's water available. That's amazing to me. All right? We all assume that deserts mean that there are no water, right? Yeah. But the truth is that there's water available if you know what you're doing. If you know how to read the signs to know where the water is, you can pretty much always dig and get to water, is what I learned. And it's the same with grief. So most people are walking in the desert and they don't know that there's water. And it's perfectly understandable for them to assume that there's no water because everybody thinks that there's not water. That's the conditioning, right? Think about this. We grew up in a society so afraid of the topic of death, of the topic of mortality, that we avoid it, we run from it, we act like it will never happen because we don't want to think about it. Not thinking about it helps us to sleep easier at night. So then when we get hit, we don't know what to do. And then we go to, where do we go? We go to our friends and our family looking for answers. How are they going to give us answers? They spent their life avoiding death too, right? Gotta find somebody who knows how to find water in the desert.
And that is grief coaching.
There you go. It's going to happen. But I understand where you're coming from because it is the most frustrating thing to me as well, because I'll watch shows or read books or see stuff online. The memes, by the way, I'm sorry, real quick.
That's okay.
The memes that people are sharing on social media and in Facebook, and those are the ones that go viral. But let me tell you, please, 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 if you're sharing those memes, if you're sharing those images and those words that say things will never change, this is permanent, I'm forever broken, please, the best thing in the world you can do is stop sharing those things, because there's a whole area of how our brain works, the conscious versus the subconscious and all of that I get into with my clients. But suffice it to say that your brain is like a sponge. It's a combination sponge and tape recorder, listening to everything that you say 24 hours a day. Even when you're asleep, what you're saying, what you're thinking, all of that is being processed. And your subconscious thinks that you're like a god. Whatever you say must be true. So every time you share that negative information, every time you talk and you say those things, right? You say this is permanent. I'll always be in this darkness. The reality is you are going to end up being right, but you're not going to be right because that was your fate. You're going to be right because we are nothing but self-fulfilling prophecies. And if you keep telling yourself that, then that's what your brain will look for. That's what you'll attract. That's what you will make happen in your life. And that limitation that says that you don't get out of this pain and misery won't be because you didn't have a way. It was impossible to get out of the pain and misery. It will be because you set that as a limitation within yourself. Please stop sharing those kinds of things and buying into that. There is a place for you. There is a way for you. There is a path for you back to a life worth living. And if and when you should ever get there, your loved one's spirit will never be happier than to see you not locked in that misery anymore. We're not just sharing stuff with ourselves, right? So our surviving loved ones around us, that energy is going to them.
In your book, you call it your grief recovery book, 14 reasons you're not letting yourself heal. And can you pick 3 that you may find are probably the most prevalent?
But I would say, just in terms of most prevalent, I think there are probably some that tend to be prevalent, and then some that are very much situational. But let me take a step back and talk about what those reasons are in general. What do I mean, or what's the point of the whole book? There are ingrained beliefs, what I like to call them, that we build up over time. Some of those ingrained beliefs go way back to childhood. We build these beliefs based on this whole process of what we're seeing in the world, the way that we're interpreting it, and then that becomes our reality. It's our way of understanding the world. And once we understand that, that becomes a foundation or a foundational point upon which we understand the rest of the world. They are 14 of the myths that I have been running into over and over and over again over the 5.5 years that I've been focusing on helping people with grief. What I came to find out was keeping people stuck. It puts us in a place where we're between that proverbial rock and hard place, and we can't allow ourselves to move forward. Let me just give you one, for instance, that if I move forward, I'll be leaving my loved one behind. That's one of the most prevalent. And sometimes we're conscious of the fact that this ingrained belief is part of us, and sometimes we're not. If you have developed that as a mindset, which, if I had to guess, I think is well over 50% of the people believe that on some level, all of a sudden, somebody like me or Anne comes along and say, you can heal, you can get better, you can get back to living your life. Then whether you're consciously thinking this or subconsciously thinking it, goes next is the feeling of, what are you saying? That you can be suggesting that I should leave my loved one behind. What do you think about me? You think I'm that horrible of a person? So whether we are consciously aware of it or not, we are locked into that space to accept the grief. We come to accept the pain. One of those things that I say in the book is we come to wear that pain and agony as a badge of honor. because it shows how much we care about our loved one. So one chapter is about this. If I move on, I'm going to leave my loved one behind. But here's the thing. It's a complete myth. It is so wrong. I've not had this one-on-one conversation with one person, no matter what their situation was, no matter how long they had been in this space, no matter who they lost, what the relationship or anything I've had. And I had one conversation with somebody in the 5.5 years about this topic and have them not realize how ridiculous it was for them to carry on that myth. Because see, the reality is what we're talking about here is not leaving your loved one behind. When I'm successfully able to work with a client, and I'm sure the same is true for you, and we don't end up having people leave their loved ones behind. It's just the opposite. Yeah. So the way that I phrase it, what you're doing is you're trying to work on yourself, and you're trying to go through this and recover and heal, not so you can leave your loved one behind. You would never do that. Let me tell you, I would never do that. If that was true, I would still be stuck in the same pain that I was some 20 years ago. Okay?
Good point. Absolutely.
But here's the thing. What we're trying to do here, what you're going to do, if you allow this change to come in, if you get help, if that's what you need, what you're really doing is you're preparing a comfortable spot in your heart, and you are taking your loved one along for the ride. And that means that you begin to live for two. And everything in your life that you do, you are doing it in a way that honors your loved one, that honors their memory, and you can enjoy it with your loved one because you have them. They are there in the spirit. You have the ability to connect with them like you never did when they were here present.
Absolutely. You know? They walk with you, and you carry them through life with you, and you can have conversations to other people, and you can be in love and joy and not feel that heartache when you talk about them. That is the beauty of doing the work and healing. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly.